Hey Parvathy, hi, how are you?
Hi Rohit, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. So first of all, thank you so much for agreeing to do this with me. Uh, I know it takes a lot of trust for you to put in me to do this, but I also trusted you to be my very first guest on my podcast. I just learned this new word today. It's like a video and a podcast.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming to my show.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
I'm very humble that you asked me, and I'm very excited for this. Yeah.
yeah, so am I. And for our audience, something very interesting I have to say. I have never really met Parvati in person. Uh, I'll go back to our story of how I became friends with her. So this was in fall 2020 when we both were at Georgia Tech, and I was looking for a partner for my deep learning project, and I wanted someone who wanted to work in natural language processing or text. And I was just scrolling through LinkedIn, and I was like, oh, there's this girl who seems to have a lot of interest in text processing. And that's how I just contacted her, and we worked on that project. But by that time, I had never discovered your blog. It was only afterwards that once you shared something on WhatsApp,
Yeah.
and I was like, wow, this girl writes and writes so well. And that is going to be our topic for today's discussion, like the main topic. And of course, we'll discuss other things. So, your blog, which brought you here today, you know what caught my attention about your blog was the name. The name of your blog is Trust Me, You're Alive. I think that's a wonderful name, pretty unique. And for a change, the blog's name is about like the reader. So when I read it, I feel certain emotions. I feel seen, I feel validated, and most importantly, I feel human. Like your blog is not like Parvati's blog, or it's like it's not about you, it's about me. And maybe it's about you, who knows. But could you tell me a bit about how this name came up? I know you have an article written on it, but yet I want to hear it from your own words.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you said it's about you, but maybe it's about me. Yeah. I actually wrote it for me. So I started it in 2014, and at the time I had no intention to make it an actual blog, like a place where I would keep posting regularly. So what happened was I had written this one satire called Mind Your Own Pickle, and I had published it in, I think, we had a college newsletter, and I thought it would be nice to have it online somewhere. But then when it came to naming it, so that time I was going through this really dark phase. And when it came to naming it, I was like, oh no, I want it to be something nice. And so Trust Me, You're Alive. There's actually, I'm so glad you asked me this, because at the time I put so much thought into it and nobody's ever asked me.
Okay.
So I think the main thing was I was going through like this really low phase. So when you read Trust Me, You're Alive, it's like, okay, if you're reading this, you're alive. So it's like someone is telling you you're alive. And so that was me saying that to myself. And I think I also thought, if someone else reads it and it's something they need to hear, it's probably a good thing. But the second side to it, which I think is very subtle, and it's probably like almost not there, is it. So there's also this side of humor to my blog. Like like being funny is sort of important to me at times. So it's like, if you're reading this, trust me, you're alive. But it's absurd, because it's like, okay, I know I'm alive. Like I have to be alive to be reading this. So that was the other side. But I think it's maybe the first one. It's something I wrote for me.
I see. Wow. Okay, that's really interesting, and it is indeed a good thing. 7 years later, when I'm reading it, it does make me feel alive. I'm sure people who have gone through low phases have read these few words and have felt validated. So thank you for naming it that. And you mentioned that you have a very you like to infuse satire and humor in your writing. Uh, and a lot of your writing is also very, very personal. It makes me feel a lot of things. Uh, so I think your writing is like a mix of so many things. There's humor, satire, a lot of feelings, very wholesome, sometimes it's nostalgic. You think these are good adjectives to describe your writing, or do you have something you think yourself is better to describe your writing?
Yeah, I'd also describe it as all those. Sometimes it's crap also. But yeah, I think a lot of it is reflective. It's like, okay, so in hindsight, so there's this. Have you watched Abhishek Upamanyu? There's a stand-up set by him where he's making fun of this friend who's यही बातें तो बाद में याद है.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, but we're in the moment right now. Live in the moment.
Yeah.
So when I saw it, I was like, oh shit, no. I mean, I feel guilty.
Yeah.
And I think I do that a lot. So in my writing also, a lot of it is very reflective. Like I'm looking back at what happened. Or I think whenever I leave a place, some months later, I'll be thinking about it. And then I'm like, okay, I want to write about it. Right. But a lot of it is also narrative, like you said. Like it'll be things that I saw. Some of it is personal, like personal stories about my mom or something which happened at home.
Right.
And I think I stopped writing satire. Like I don't know, sometime 2017. I remember I wrote something, and then I just felt like everything that was happening around us was like so. It was like. Funny stuff was going on, so it was like it wasn't so hard to make it funny, but I also couldn't find the humor in it, so I just kind of lost it. So I'm trying to write more satire now because yeah.
Well, I mean, you're finding humor in so many other things. I think your favorite article of mine, it's a humorous, hilarious article. It's called Every Person on Instagram. And I have my notes with me here, and I have to read like a couple of those. Just let me just find my notes. Okay, so for our audience, this article, she's written pretty recently, I think, and she's described the type of personalities you see on Instagram. My favorite, and they're like, I think 20, they're like 16 personalities. And I'll tell you like some of my favorites. So one of them is the Good Samaritan. When you sit and click through 79 odd canyon stories posted by a lovable friend who doesn't yet know they are boring because they have equally sweet friends that won't skip nor tell. This is hilarious. And there's another one, the Liberal. Their favorite quip is, everyone has a right to live the way they want, but no, not like that. Having metamorphosed into worse than the conservatives they abhorred, others quake at their judgment gaze. We asked if they had a response. Let me check Twitter to know how I feel about that was all we got. I mean, this is amazing. This cracked me up, and every time I go back to this, I still crack up. So this is like the humor part, and there's something that got me almost to tears, I would say. I think this is the Tagore poem you've written. You've written about the Tagore poem. So I'll quickly read it out to our audience. The poem goes this way. I ask, but how am I to get up to you? They answer, come to the edge of the earth, lift up your hands to the sky, and you will be taken up into the clouds. My mother is waiting for me at home, I say. How can I leave her and come? Then they smile and float away. So this part, this snippet is from a poem called Clouds and Waves by Rabindranath Tagore. And what I liked about what you've written is exactly how I felt when I read this snippet. You write that you didn't realize it was an excerpt and that the poem didn't end there. The abrupt end of it came as a cold shock, as if the last line served to close any possibilities, implying that the child never left. Yet the brevity of it hit harder, that the clouds understood and left as soon as they had arrived, that there was no discussion, only a simple thought backed by a young boy's emotion and rationale. It was as if Tagore meant that life was usually that simple. This is brilliant stuff, man. And these two are polar opposites. Like you found humor in everyday life and you articulated it so well. And here's something which is so simple and yet so profound. So, and guys, these are just two articles of hers. There's like a ton of them on, of course, on her blog. So I hope you go and read them. But these two are my personal favorites.
Okay, yeah, and thank you. I don't take compliments there, so that's why I'm like, okay, I don't know how to respond.
Yeah. Any special memories of writing any of these articles?
Yeah, so the every person on Instagram I remember, like I just remember there was this one friend of mine, and he would post about cryptocurrencies, and like he would keep posting them for like months, and then one day he was like, okay, nobody's interested anymore, so I'm gonna stop.
Oh.
And he was, but he was also, I think I've mentioned this, that he was also one of those who would keep publishing like any updates. So I would actually check his stories sometimes. Like Instagram used to be my source of news at some point. So I was like, oh no, I'm grateful that these people exist. Yes. But then it's also like funny at some in some ways it's also funny. So yeah, but the Tagore one, yeah, I remember when I read it. At first, I was like, wait, are the clouds? What are there to take him away? In the sense, take him up to heaven.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh no, that's serious. And then it's like, oh, that is it. Like he says, no, my mom is waiting, so I can't leave. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, okay, fine. Yeah, okay. So I was like, wow. Yeah. So that was it. I think it's a pretty short write-up also.
It is short, but very profound, I must say. And Parvathy, you have so many of these on your blog, and of course, you have been writing them since 2014. But I'm sure that's not when you started your writing journey. I'm sure it must have begun maybe in school. So when did the writing bug catch you?
Yeah. So I used to journal a lot when I was probably like starting from when I was 10 or something, because my brother bought me those diaries, those annual diaries that you would have. And my sole goal was to just fill it up with stuff. And a lot of it is very embarrassing. And I remember at one point I had three, like I was obsessed about like writing fiction, and I was so bad at it. And I'm still bad at it. Like I can't do fiction. I have so much respect for people that actually write fiction and just create stuff from scratch. Because everything I write is inspired by like a poem, like you just mentioned, or it's like a memory, or it's an experience, or it's a person I met.
Right.
And so I filled up, I think, 3 full diaries with this story, and I forgot who died in the. I would go back to my first book, and I was like, oh shit, no, this person had died in the first chapter. I forgot, and I forget what the mom's name is, because I have no idea what's happening. Yeah, it was hilarious, because as I was writing, I was like, oh no, this is bad. Like I can't remember the plot even. I was like, okay, fine. I never finished any of those stories. Like it would just go on and on and on. And then my diary would end, and I'd be like, okay, fine, let's just call it a day. And I remember I wrote this funny, but it was a very short write-up. It was about somebody who was getting hit by chappals while he was speaking, and he was being very sarcastic about it. And I wrote something, and this uncle of mine who's a journalist, he read it and he was like, it's funny, you should keep writing. And I was 13 at the time, and I was like, oh, that meant a lot to me, because my dad read it and he was laughing. But when someone tells you to keep writing, you're like, yeah, okay, I'd like to do that. So and in school we had those essay writing competitions and all.
Right.
So I used to write in those and win prizes. So my English teachers usually, most of them used to like me.
Right.
So I used to feel good about my writing then. But I think when I used to be younger, I used to think that everyone writes, because you have to write those English essays. Yeah, you have to write. Yeah. So it was never like a thing which was like, oh, you can be a writer. It was more like everybody writes. Right. But when I was around 11th and 12th, some of my friends would tell me you should try doing English literature, which I later realized it's a completely different thing from just writing.
Right.
So yes, I used to be very confused also, but that's when I started writing. And Yeah, these personal essays, I think I started writing those because initially I never thought anybody would read them, first of all. So when people started reading, I was like, oh no, I shouldn't have written that. Or I should. So I became very conscious. And I still have those sometimes. I just get very self-conscious. And then I can't write, like somebody will be like, oh, this was cool. I'd love to read. I remember once somebody said, I'm looking forward to what you write next. And I didn't write anything for 3 whole months.
So much pressure.
Yeah, because I was like, and it's just one person telling me. It can be just one person telling me, I'm looking for it. I'm like, oh no, that person's waiting. Is he going to like this? This is what I'm writing. I'm like, oh no. And I remember when I was doing my internship, I told that so we were just talking about ourselves in the team. I said one of my hobbies is writing. And I have a blog, and one of my very sweet seniors, and he was so enthusiastic and very encouraging. He was like, oh, you should share your blog with us. And I shared it, and then I didn't write anything for a month. I was like, oh no, I don't know who is checking my blog.
So this is very interesting. So I'm sure like over the past 7-8 years, your writing must have, of course, evolved as you experience newer emotions and you have different life experiences. But you said that you get conscious, and when someone said that they read it, you're like, oh, I should have written that. So are you, first of all, 2 questions. Are you very critical of your own writing? And second, do you like look back and sometimes like cringe at your own stuff?
So I'm not critical of my own writing. Because I feel like I'm very aware of my limitations, and I know I don't put work in as much as I should or want to.
Yeah.
So regarding the writing, I think the main thing is usually I have a bunch of stuff in my head and I want it down. So I will. It's the first draft is usually like a brain dump. So once I have all of that in, I'm kind of satisfied. I'm like, okay, is this all I had to say? Okay, fine. And then usually I edit it, and I think you mentioned Winter Romance. That is my favorite write-up that I have, because I wrote it and I edited it for 2 days. Like the whole thing, it took 3 days. But I was very happy with it in the end. Like I edited it really well. So it was like I couldn't squeeze it out anymore, and I felt like there was no fluff in there.
Okay.
So yeah, so sometimes when people tell me, oh, I read this one, sometimes I do go back and I'm like, oh, maybe I could have edited it a little better.
Right.
Because it's the editing part. I feel like I usually spend. I just do it really quick, because sometimes what happens is I obsess over it and then I just don't get it out at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I reach that point, I'm like, okay, let's just push it out.
Okay, but that's really interesting. You spoke a bit about your process. I want you to elaborate more on that. So you said you have certain thoughts in your head which you just want to put out in the world or on paper maybe. So then how does the process go from there? Let's say you are, because I saw that like a couple of articles you've written them in the Texas Driving License Center. So how does this whole thing work? Like, let's begin from the time where you have a certain thought. Let's say you are at a supermarket. So how does the writing process go from there to when Rohit is reading the blog?
Okay. Oh, that's an interesting question. So if I have a thought while I'm at the supermarket, which happens a lot. So I think supermarket is I don't know. I'm like zeroing in on that. But as opposed to driving, where I cannot have a constant flow of thought, because all of a sudden there'll be like something happens and then you have to be in the moment. So especially if I'm in those places where I can afford to be distracted, it usually, it's like a train of thought. And sometimes I feel like it's not complete, so I need time. And most of the time that's what happens. Okay. So especially when I wrote the Kendeda buildings, it was, So I would walk to class every day, and I would have so many thoughts about like all the buildings and everything I was seeing. I'd be like, what is going on in that house and all of those things. And I think music is a lot also like it brings a lot of thoughts to me. I think maybe it's nostalgia, it's memories, or people, like it reminds me of people. Right. So once I feel like, okay, I don't think I have anything more to add, that's when I sit down and I write. Because when I'm writing, it's just like, usually it is, if it's a piece of that sort, it's usually just connecting all the thoughts and then I have like a full piece.
Okay, so hold on. So you have thoughts. You come home and you have you just write it out to connect the dots and the points, and you have your first draft ready. And you said you don't edit a lot. So on an average, how much do you edit after you have the first draft ready?
So if it's and I think maybe I don't edit a lot when it's a short piece, and if it's one of those pieces which have like sections, those I do try to edit. But I think maybe I don't know. It can be anywhere between like 1 hour. I almost feel embarrassed to say this, but sometimes it's just like 1 hour I spend on it. Like, okay, this is fine. And I think, but what does happen is sometimes I put something out and I'm like, oh, okay, nobody's gonna read this, and then people start telling me, hey, this is good, and I go back and I'm like, oh man. So this I think maybe connects to this workshop I attended. It's called The Art of Clear Writing by Amit Verma. I attended it last summer, and so there the stress was all on the audience, and it's like you have to respect the audience's time, and they start with it and they're not going to finish it if it's not worth their time. So the more fluff there is and the less edited it is, it's usually like, okay, maybe you could have done better.
You attended a workshop on writing. You also read a book on writing. Do you think it is important for people who write, even as a hobby, to keep doing these things? And what else do you do to make sure that you're up to date with your writing technologies?
Yeah, I think reading is very important. All the writers say that, and I believe it, because every time I know that every time I read a book, there are points where I am just like, oh wow, this is so articulate, and sometimes I read something and I'm like, oh, I would have stretched this out in 2 sentences, and they made it so crisp and short. I see that, I'm like, oh, sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish I could do that, but sometimes I also feel like I need to write something right now. And I just feel like it comes out better just because I was reading something and I try to sort of make it crisper. I try to keep the audience in mind, which is what I think was most stressed in that workshop that I attended.
Okay.
Yeah, but I don't read as much as I should. But,
yeah,
reading is important.
Yeah, because there's this website called Brain Pickings where this author she reads so much, and she writes about all these books. And I sent it over to you, and I was like, oh, I'm sure she knows about this. And you were like, no, like I'm very surprised and very happy with this website because she reads so much. And I agree, like to put out content, you need to consume content. So what are some of your favorite books, biggest influences in terms of reading?
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe favorite blogs, like do you have favorite blogs which you admire?
Yes, I think, so I used to read a lot of those, the books that all kids used to read, like Roald Dahl. I used to read a lot of that when I was younger. But I also read a lot of Paulo Coelho, so the author of The Alchemist. And so our school library had like a whole section of his books, like 20 of his books or something. I just went through them one by one. And I think a lot of them were very similar in that it would be just one event happens and then he would stretch his thoughts for like 5 pages. And I think maybe that's what I do also. Like one thing happens and then I'm just like, and the person's like, okay, what happened next? Are you going to get to it? Just so I think I do that. But I think Arundhati Roy, the God of Small Things, I was mind blown when I read it. I was like, I mean, it's almost like prose, and it's. I mean, the rhythm, and I remember there was this one comparison which she made. There was this analogy. She said a thought was lodged in, I don't remember which character's head, but the thought was lodged in his head like mango hair stuck between molars. And I was like, wow, that is, because I read it and I got it, but then I was like, I just kept the book. I was like, I need to take a moment. I was like, wow, like, it's so specific, and it's like yeah.
And she's from Kerala, and you're from Kerala, and the mango analogy would be from Kerala as well. Like,
yeah, it's such a tropical thing, and it's just like, wow. I was like, wow, shit, yeah.
A lot of what you write is extremely personal. Two of my favorite personal articles of yours are I'm a Crier, or it's titled Cry. And the article about faith, where you go to this temple with your mom and all that happens there. You know, I even as a reader, even when I didn't know you that well, and I still don't know you that well, I think I still feel a sense of an intimate connection as a reader. I feel like I know bits and pieces of you. Someone who you daily interact with might not know if they don't read what you write.
Yeah.
Does it take a lot of courage to put yourself and put something so personal within you out there? You've written about your breakups, your lowest points, your crushes. You've written everything that's extremely personal. How brave do you have to be to do this?
So I think so. Initially, when I think probably the first personal thing I wrote about was there's an article called Evening Coffee House Visits. So it's about me going to Indian coffee house, and I would go there a lot. So I put that out, and it's very unpolished. It's about like every single thought that I've had. So I would walk from the coffee house to my home, and I would see all these buildings, and each building, like there were buildings that I had gone to because I lived for 20 plus years in Toronto. So these are all very familiar. So when I wrote that, I wrote every single thought that I had. I didn't filter anything, but also I never thought anybody would read it. So once I published it, so what happened was initially I remember a couple of people read it, some of my closest friends or whoever would read my stuff, like my brothers read it. But over the years, I don't know how people started going back and reading it. And I was like, oh man, okay, a lot of people are reading it. Let me see what I wrote. And that's when I was like, oh shit, I read, I did not filter any of it. But I think I continued to do that because people were very kind with whatever they said. Like I never got bad feedback. In the sense, I mean, I've got feedback about my writing that it needs to be better, all stuff like that.
Right.
Never about what I wrote about my thoughts or, what I felt or my feelings.
Right.
Or so even when I wrote about my lows, I remember there was this one senior, he had written about his depression. And that was, so I just came across his blog, right? And that was so similar to the way I wrote about my lows. And I was like, these are two different people. And he was my senior in college, but we didn't really know each other. And it was eerily similar. Like even the comparisons we made were like, oh no, like, yeah. So I think maybe initially when people started reading it, I was worried maybe that, or what would they say? But people have just been very open and kind about what when they read it, because I think also when I was younger, I used to think that people are very different. But I think as I grow older, I mean, everyone goes through stuff at some point, and everyone relates to stuff.
Yeah.
And even recently, so this Wordle app, my brother was talking about it. I don't play it,
right?
But he told me he was telling me about all the rules, and then at the very end, he told me so everyone has the same word.
Yeah.
And I was like, shit, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, because I think that's the best part of it. Like you're going through this shared experience, and everybody is going through that. I was like, wow, okay, that's awesome. But I also think it's maybe because I went through lows at a very young age, like relatively young age. As I grew older, I just became very comfortable with writing, all of that.
Okay. So what has been some of the most heartwarming reactions you've had?
So I think the most popular post of mine is this. I I was middle class before it was cool.
Yeah, I love that post. It's like, is that the same one where you were mad at your mom because you assumed you all were much poorer or something like that? I love that. It was one of the ones I have shortlisted to like show to our audience, but I think they should go and read it more than me showing it. But yeah, continue.
Yeah, so when I posted that, again, so like I said, I think we've discussed this before. Like a lot of times when I put out stuff, it's not necessarily my best friends who will tell me, oh, I relate to this. It's like one random person on the internet will, oh, no, this line, oh my God, I relate so heavily to this. So even when I read that, I had no expectations that people would relate to it, and I had no idea because I don't think we discussed it so much.
Right.
But I know we also read books like Malgudi Days,
right.
So I know that other human beings would have gone through it. Yeah. So I was just posting whatever experiences I went through, and I knew there was humor in it. So I was like, okay, yeah, let me point out the humor in it also because and maybe I reached that point where I could do that also.
Right. True.
So when I put it out, oh my God, like so many friends from my school, my undergrad, I was like, oh wow. Like I remember there was this one friend of mine, she was from my undergrad, and she said, oh, I've never discussed this with anyone. I got that response a lot actually. Like, right. I've never discussed this with anybody. But there was a friend who told me she never told her mom that, and she was in kindergarten. She never told her mom about this picnic that their school was planning because and it was not even a lot of money. It was like 50 rupees at that time. Right. But that was probably a lot of money. I mean, yeah, back then. Yeah. So she never told her that there was a picnic. And so all these stories that I think that's the best part about when I write my stories, like I get to hear so much. So when I write satire, I don't get that kind of response. It's usually like, oh, this was funny, or oh, this was so clever. And I'm like, yeah, thank you. Yeah, when I wrote it. So sometimes I'm just like, yeah, I knew it. That was so clever. But sometimes I'm like, yeah, I was waiting for feedback. I'm so glad.
Parvathy, you have an article where you write how your most personal is also your best. I also have another take on that. I feel like the more local stuff you write about, the more global appeal it has. Because if you see your articles, they have a very specific cultural setting. There's stuff about Kerala, like your home in Trivandrum, your life at Georgia Tech, Atlanta, your life in Delhi, Rajendranagar. All these places, not all of your readers know about, and yet we can like relate to them. Perhaps because they are so culturally specific that it starts having like a global value. I know I'm not being very articulate about this, but like, what do you think about this whole thing? It's very easy to relate to what you write, even though we have sometimes no context of the places and the settings things occur in.
Yeah. I think I think it is very regional, and it is very probably very local also, and very specific to the place I lived in and the people I met. But I also feel like that's how most people are. I think most of our experiences they come from relationships, right?
Right.
So I feel like, and relationships usually are things everyone has in their lives, and the way you. So I was watching there's this movie called Ladybird. It's my favorite.
I love Ladybird.
Oh, I've watched it so many times. It's such a fantastic movie.
Yeah, I love that film. But sorry, continue. I just got excited.
No, go ahead. What are you gonna say? Yeah.
No, I just love that film, and I think that year there were like a lot of films which I like loved a lot personally. There was Ladybird, there was Call Me by Your Name, there was Blue Moonlight, and like La La Land. Like they were in that same time. And Ladybird is like nothing really happens. It's just a slice of life kind of film, but it's such a relatable girl, and her relationship with her mom.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and I watched that movie and I was like, yeah, this is exactly how I used to be.
Yeah.
And she is in Sacramento, right? She's in Sacramento in California. And I was like, I used to fight with my mom so much, like so much. We used to not hate each other,
Yeah.
but and yeah. And it's like, I also used to go to these plays like drama, and I knew I was bad at it, but I had this English teacher who would be like, oh no, you are so good at everything. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm bad at it. I know it. I know I'm bad at it. But there'd be like this one teacher who believes in you, and then you would think that, oh, I'm special. And everyone thinks.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, this is exactly how I used to be. So I think those emotions are just universal, right?
Yeah.
Like, just like, like I write about my stuff with my mom. And I think people relate to those things, I think.
Yeah, but you mentioned you were really bad at drama. I have to show this to my audience. So yesterday I was talking your LinkedIn profile, and there's this in your history when you were at CET, you've written you were in CET or school. You were involved in all these clubs, and you were in the quiz club. And then there's a quiz after that where you say, to be honest, I was really bad at quiz, and that just cracked me up.
I was.
To be that honest and that self-aware again in your LinkedIn profile, like as a recruiter, I would be like, oh damn, I want this girl in my office. She'll be a whole different vibe.
Yeah, I think that self-awareness, but I think came from people telling me because we'd go to competitions and I know the team is losing because I'm the one half of it. I know she's doing her job.
Oh God!
I think that is just in my face. I can't escape it. I was bad.
You told me once is that at GT when you wanted to write something which has had a lot of feels, you were like, oh, I need to get sad. I need to feel sad, and then your friend used to get worried. Tell me about that.
Oh yeah. So there is a poster. I think it's called Evening of Sad Songs or something.
Right.
And so I remember. So there was one day where I was not one day. There were a couple of days where I would actually be blue in the evenings. I think it usually used to be days where we probably had so much to do, and then you couldn't do any of the other stuff. So I'd just be like, oh my God, it's so frustrating. So in the evening, or maybe it was just stuff, there was nothing going on. So I was blue, maybe. So I can't remember what it was. But I would just listen to all these sad songs in the evening and be in my room and just be sad. But it's not really sad. It is one of those things. So this is also, I think, another thing which I found along the way, that I used to think I'm a sad person, and I would have these dramatic, if someone took a video of it, people would be commenting over it. Oh my God, such a drama queen. She's not even. But then I would realize, oh shit, I'm not actually sad.
Right, yeah.
But then when I listen to these songs, it goes back to that, when I hear music, it brings back a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So one evening I was like, oh shit, I should write about it.
What advice or tips would you give to people who want to start writing, who have a lot of thoughts in their head, but can't seem to just start or can't seem to keep themselves consistent? What do you have to say to them?
I don't know if I'm the right person to be saying this, but I know what other writers say. Right. And because I went to the workshop, I know that it's advice that's also useful, which is if you want to write, you have to start somewhere, right? And I think putting it out first is important. So if you're not able to, spend so much time on it that you first write a draft and then you create another draft, you keep editing it. And if that's the process that's sort of just bogging you down, just put it out. And, people will read it. And I think that's a good thing. No matter where you publish it, whether it's Medium or WordPress, people will read it. Okay. And you will get comments. And based on that comment, you will want to do better, or you want to, I don't know, maybe filter your thoughts, whatever it is. It doesn't matter what you want to write about. I think I think that's the way to go. And I think, so I joined the workshop mainly to have a community. And because I remember I thought that it will help me with prompts, and it did. It will give you, it's just a community which wants to keep writing, right? So it's not something you have to keep doing every week, every month. You do it if you want to do it, because you're working on yourself when you're writing. And so there's a community you can always reach out to. I think if that's something you're interested in, maybe something of that sort might also be helpful, because
so starting somewhere, just putting stuff out there.
And
community, I think these
for sure. I think at least from my experience, like, people are usually very kind. That was like a very nice discovery, because at the time I didn't think much about it, but now that I look back, like especially if you put out just a dance video, there's always people who talk shit about it. I'm like, it's not even that they're saying it's bad. They're like, is this what you want to do with your life?
Oh my God.
It's just a video. Oh my. So, and I think I think that's maybe a huge difference. And people who read write-ups are usually kinder, and maybe they're just more open-minded. And they're very empathetic.
People really admire that someone can articulate their thoughts. I don't know how it works, but...
I think people are usually appreciative. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So as you all can see, like, the sun has crossed different latitudes or longitudes or whatever, and we are towards the end. But this has been so much fun. I have been planning this for quite a while, and I know we both were really excited. I hope you had fun. Any parting thoughts?
Oh, I had so much fun. Like I said, so when you mentioned this, I was like, oh, what do we talk about? It's not that important. I'm going to feel like an impossible. No. But this was so much fun. This was a lot of fun. I was looking forward to this. And it's been so much fun. I am so excited for you and for this podcast and vodcast. It's not a podcast.
The vodcast.
And and all the other guests and all the episodes that you have coming up.
Yeah. Thank you so much for those kind words. And again, I must thank you for putting your faith in me. But yes, thank you so much. I'm so happy that we recorded this. And again, keep writing. I love your blog.
Keep writing. I'm looking forward to your posts.
Yes, I will keep writing. I'll keep getting inspired by you. But for our audience, the name of Parvathy's blog is Trust Me, You're Alive. You can just Google it. You will find it. And feel free to reach out to any of us. We'll be always happy to answer your questions. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. See ya. Bye.